Okay. Welcome back. I invite you to find your seat. Dr. Lockhart-Gilroy challenged us earlier to center the voices of those pushed to the margins, especially youth and young adults. Now she returns to guide us in exploring what this practice looks like. Please welcome back the Reverend Dr. Annie Lockhart-Gilroy.
Hello, all. Um, so my hope with this, well, let me start this way. I have a few ideas of what I want to do at this time. But first, I want to ask of you, is there something you're particularly looking for? Like, what do you want from this time? If there are no answers, I will proceed. But do you want? We can start with particular questions. Are there particular things that you're hoping? Like, I'm sitting here because I want to know X. Yes, ma'am.
And we're, of course, trying to figure out what youth ministry is. Oh, thank you. And so I guess I would, and even in thinking of what you have shared with us, how do you start these conversations, and even with youth? I was talking about we have a bunch of high school girls. I don't know that we have any high school boys that come to worship but won't come to youth group, and so I'm thinking of just going to dinner with these girls and try to start conversations. But do you have any other suggestions for how do we get this started, and even getting our congregation to understand that youth ministry isn't getting all these young kids here on Sunday morning, that youth ministry is out here. And I'm also looking for ways to connect with the schools in our community, and what can I do there? But
Okay.
yes, so
So it looks like you have some really good starting points already, right? I think conversation and communication is a good place to start. Working with the schools in a variety of ways is a good place to start. I think that is often in congregations, especially, I don't know how many youth you have, but congregations that don't tend to have a lot of youth, moving into those models of forming community through conversation, I think, is a really good way to go. I think for many congregations, the days of we're doing this really good, big, huge group, and we get together once a week, and and then we do this week in the summer, like that is, youth ministry has a lot more to compete with than it used to. And I'm gonna try not to go on a rant about because the rant's not about the fact that there's stuff to compete with. The rant's about the complaint that people are like, oh, folks aren't coming to church, and they're doing soccer instead. And when I ask, well, what are you offering them? It's like, well, they should come to church. Okay, well, I mean, you haven't convinced me, and I go to church all the time, right? So I think those one-on-one conversations. I really think that your first question is the best one. Like, what is youth ministry? And the fact is that that's different for everybody, but it's a question that every congregation should ask themselves and not assume they know, right? Because youth ministry, because you think that youth are the future of the church and you want to get them involved, looks different from youth ministry that acknowledges the agency of young people and the fact that they are part of the church now, which is different from one that looks at youth ministry as a passing down of wisdom, which is different from one that looks at youth ministry as a sharing of wisdom, right? What are your congregational goals? And I think in the past, when I have asked those questions, people look at me like, well, the goals that you're supposed to have. We all know these, do
Well,
we?
I think my church would say to get our youth back.
Right.
And I keep trying to tell them, no, I'm not here to get more people in the pews. I'm here to figure out what our mission is in the world.
And to get our youth back from what?
Right.
For what?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Is it because like your pews are empty? Right? Is it because you think that you are lacking something because they are not in this space? Is it because, young people today with their rock and roll and long hair? Right? Like for what?
Yeah.
And these are the questions I think we need to have with congregational leaders before we start venturing off on, let's make some s'mores and have a bonfire. I mean, those are beautiful things. But
I would also share, a resource that I found is Andrew Root. And I don't know if you're familiar with him, but we just read a book, my youth director and I, about youth ministry and why kids don't go to youth group and why parents don't care. Mm-hmm. And he talked about that same thing of, the purpose of youth group in the 80s and the 90s, that doesn't work. And now we are competing with sports and drama and all of these things. And why is that? Why are parents taking their kids there versus youth group?
Right. I remember when I was my first job was a cashier at a women's clothing store. And I remember when they first opened, continuously opened on Sundays. Right? I used to open on Sundays during the Christmas season. But then they just said they were going to open on Sundays. And at from 1 to 5, right? And it was like, right? And quite frankly, I don't fault young people for going to other things. You go to things that give you life. So you want a successful youth ministry? Build a youth ministry that gives people life. Simple, isn't it?
Thank you.
I like that. All right. Any other thoughts, comments, directions you're hoping we would go? Yes, ma'am. Thank you for passing the mic around.
I teach 3rd through 5th graders in Sunday school. Mm-hmm. And I have very healthy, very able children who are compassionate, but I haven't had enough experience I don't have good insight in helping them think about being with rather than doing for. Mm. They are very oriented toward doing compassionate things for people. Mm-hmm. They don't have the background, nor maybe do I, to think about being with and being part of rather than doing to or doing for. Mm-hmm. And I just need insight in thinking through these things in order to lead and shape.
Right. Before I answer that, I also want to say, I always say I'm not the sage on the stage, although I'm literally on a stage. But I do recognize that there is wisdom in the room. And I would love for this to be a conversation. So as I respond, and if other people have responses, feel free to share. Sorry, we might run you around a little bit. But But I just want to first acknowledge that I recognize I'm not the only brain in the room, and there's a lot of experience here. There's a lot of knowledge here. There's a lot of wisdom here. And sharing with each other is a beautiful thing. How old are your students again? 3rd through 5th grade. Oh, see, the little people. I don't work with the little people. No. Sorry, little people scare me. No, I taught middle school for like a week and a half. I would say, so one of the things that I think is the best teacher is modeling and having conversation, right? The doing things to and not with, doing things for and not with, is common, especially in privileged areas, and I don't know your context, so, right? It's like I said before, it's hard to give specific advice to a context in a group you don't know. But generally speaking, there is this sense of savior mentality. Right. If you have a high Christology, you could tell them we already have a savior. As someone who did youth ministry in an urban setting for many years, I can't tell you the amount of crap that I got that I looked at and thought, who in the world will want this? What am I supposed to do with these 20-year-old computers? Like, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do with them, right? This idea of like, and so often it was just dropped. Nobody called me and said, do you want this? It was just like, here. And sometimes one person's junk is another person's junk. And what is helpful for me is to say to folks, so what is this experience doing for you, right? And do you want to have conversation with these people? Like what, you know what I mean? Why do you think they need you and your help? And how do you know what they need if you don't have conversation with folks, right? Folks actually, I think for the most part, many times know what they need. I've had several conversations with folks who wanted to come and you know, I'm going to come help you. And I'm going to come do this. And I would respond, okay, what makes you think no, we don't need that, right? Or because while I was working with youth ministry, I was also 9 miles down the road teaching at a very privileged independent high school. And so many conversations of, you know, well, we can go and tutor. And I said, well, if you want a relationship, if you want a, you know, like a partnership, think about, like, if you're going to teach them this, what are they going to teach you? And then I had to learn to say, if you're going to teach them this, what are they going to teach you? And don't say how to rap, right? So, I mean, underneath that is a lot of classism and sometimes a lot of racism that needs to be addressed. And and I don't know how to do that with I know there are resources out there, but I think, oh, see, we got hands. I love it. I think that having those conversations and addressing those in the adults that form them, right? Because that's true of privileged congregations as a whole. Thinking that, you know, it's my job to help the needy, so I'm gonna give, and there's absolutely nothing that you can give me. I saw hands.
One of my answers to your question would be, if your young people have the model where they go on a summer trip, and if you call it a mission trip, don't call it a mission trip. Amen. And or vet the organizations and see if the organizations are also calling it a mission trip, because that is the process of, I'm going to help you. But there are a lot more organizations out there called service learning trips, and it's all about going and being of service, but also learning from the community that you're doing the service in. And they're really focused on you coming back and implementing what you have learned from communities that you visit. And also, you still get to be of service. And so that's one I mean, it's a lot of words in the mouth. So, are you coming to the service learning trip this summer? It's a mission trip, but you practice it, and then it becomes like, oh yeah, we don't call it a mission trip anymore.
It's been a long time since I've worked with that age group, but when I did, there was a story I always told about the Boy Scout who goes to help the little old lady across the street, only to discover she was waiting to be picked up and didn't want to go across the street. And so the lesson is you always ask. And one of the things when you want to help somebody is you ask what kind of help they need, and you let them tell you. For children, it's also helpful, especially if they're going to be sitting with people who are physically limited. One of the things they can do to be with is ask them to tell a story, because that way the child is asking for them to work with them rather than the other way around. And that's one step in that process, is just those things.
I'm not sure this is an answer, but it was an experience. I started a thing at the church, called it Pastor's Play Day. Every other week, first grade to fifth graders would come and we'd play. And one of the things we did, we would break for the summer, and when we would start again, when school started, the first thing we would do is I would have them sit down and I would say, okay, what are the rules? There have to be rules for play day. And I would have them tell me what the rules were. And they knew what the rules were supposed to be. You don't hit other kids. You don't interrupt them. They had all these. They knew all them. Right. So they created the rules. And then it was easy throughout the year. If anything came up, but you said that's what the rule is. And then, oh, okay. I think it goes along with asking them.
Mm-hmm. Hopefully that's helpful. There is a hand over there.
First of all, I attend Marcia's church, and I see her in the hallway with the kids, and it's fantastic and all that they are doing. But in my experience in children's ministry, talking about with rather than doing for, intergenerational classes, ministry, I've done intergenerational vacation Bible schools, intergenerational Advent studies, things like that, in which they learn so much from each other, and they are really doing things with one another rather than for. And I've seen great growth and experience with that.
Excellent, thanks. There is a great chapter on intergenerational mentoring, written by this scholar named Annie Lockhart-Gilroy. In the book, Nurturing the Sanctified Imagination of Urban Youth. And one of the ways that I encourage that is through intergenerational reciprocal mentoring.
I was, something she said made me think of this. I started out as a music teacher and taught K-12 music and different things for 20 years. But the most important thing in elementary music that I learned in college is experience first. So with young children, if I come to a group of kindergartners and say, well, the beat is a steady pulse throughout time, they don't know what I'm talking about. But I can turn on music and we can keep the beat in different parts of our body. And so I've talked with my church even, and it struck me that, I need to bring this to the youth, not just the whole. We can't explain God, but we can experience God. And so I think if we find those experiences with our young people, even taking them out of the classroom to say, where do you find God? Out in the yard, or where in the building, throughout the building, that it's experience first, I think is the key there. That rather than sit down and try to tell them and here's what this story says, and here, and I grew up with the felt board. I love a good felt board. But but I think that getting those experiences and having them talk about their experiences of God.
Anyone else? Questions, thoughts? Let's talk a little bit about, well, first I'm going to ask, what time do we end? I'm sorry, I should know that. So what? 3:45. Oh, we got lots of time. Lovely. One of the things that I often hear when talking about working with young people with disabilities, I focus on physical disabilities, but recognizing disabilities as a whole. But physical disabilities in particular, I will hear a lot of, but we don't have any. Right? So we don't need to do that stuff, right? Because we don't have any. And my first question is, well, one, how do you know you don't have any? Let's start there. Right? And two, are you also saying you don't want any? Because if you don't have the setup, right, you can't be surprised about people not feeling comfortable in your space. So there's no need to wait, right? And additionally, it's really about making sure your space, your attitude, a variety of things is welcoming. So if you are thinking that's not a priority, at least I want you to name it. I want you to say that as of right now, we don't want to welcome people with physical disabilities. Own it. Oh, you're not comfortable in saying that? So then maybe we should do something else, right? I also realize that I do believe that sometimes, most of the times, including everybody is a very difficult task, right? And sometimes can't be done. And I don't think youth ministries should not go hiking or camping or doing all of these things, right? What I am most focused on is the awareness that some people are excluded. And that you say that and you name that, and the recognition that with some tweaks, there can be alternatives, right? If you are going on a weekend camping trip, everybody don't need to hike that mountain. And some people that are physically able to do it don't want to hike the mountain, right? So what other alternatives are there? Right? And you're being aware of that. And if the trip in and of itself is grueling, and what else are you doing that weekend? Can we do another trip? Can we do another gathering? So instead of some people get to grow together as a community and other people get to stay home by themselves, we have people growing in the community in two different spaces. Right? And then we can come together and they could tell stories about their trips, right? How do we think more broadly and not assume people's needs, right? And give options for a variety of things. I often say, don't wanna is also a good reason. So we give options, because I don't think that we need to make sure or demand that people tell us their personal medical information. So let's make things available, right? Let's think ahead. As I told my story, some of the things that I talked about in retrospect, yeah, those things were causing me pain. I didn't think that way. Because who listens to their mother when they're 16? But I didn't think that way. All I knew is like we went hiking and then slept on the floor and I was fine. And the next day I couldn't move and I was like, I wonder what happened, right? I mean, so I could not have communicated that to somebody. So we talk and we give options. I'm pausing it. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, what's your name? Anna. Yes, Anna.
I worked at the Geosciences College at University of Oklahoma when there was a Geosciences College at OU. And when the ADA was passed, every department sent the secretary to the meeting with the lawyer to learn what our ADA requirements were. I mean, the sexism is already present, obviously. And then we all came back to brief our bosses, all of them white men, about what was required, and they were, we had all the language. We need accommodations for people who need them and for people who request them. And the hysteria from those men was absolutely insane. We have to cancel the geology camp, but it's a requirement for the degree, but we can't have it if we can't have everybody go on it. They went round and round in circles, and the four of us women are sitting there saying, all you have to do is find a way to accommodate those who need it. Well, but if we can't make them hike around in the Wichitas, it's not the same experience. But you can take the hiking trails that are paved. You can do the same work some other way. You can bring samples. I mean, we came up with all kinds of ideas, and they were sitting there having hysterics. They had hysterics for 2 weeks. So one of the biggest problems is, this is the way we've always done it. I cannot imagine it any other way. Oh my God, the world is ending. And part of the job is working around that panic and seeing, and I came up at that point with the image that I have used many, many times for many, many things, that everything is made of Lego bricks. And that when you take apart the elements of the experience, you can find other ways to recombine them and still have those elements present, even if the experience looks very different. And that this is part of our job, is to figure out what the elements are that are significant and that we wish to share, and that how do we combine them so they're accessible to everybody, or just to each other in different ways.
Right.
But yeah, that was fun to watch those guys freak out.
Thanks. I think I saw a hand over there. Every time I hear someone say, but it won't be the same, I always wonder, why does it have to be the same to be equally valid? Right. You have different people, it's not the same. Right? So people have different experiences. Why does it have to be the same in order to be valid? Let's explore that for a minute. And then who sets this standard that it has to be this particular way? I remember when ADA was passed and there, I was in college when they were putting in an elevator in the Union building, sophomore year, and there wasn't one before. And I remember students thinking, students were complaining, this is a waste of money, right? And I wasn't paying attention to what legislation, so I didn't know that the ADA had passed. But I remember saying, but we have a student that's in a wheelchair. And he comes in and he gets his meals. Then he has to leave the building, go around the building, go down the loading dock to get his mail. He should just be able to take an elevator. And someone said, so we're going to do all this for one student? And I was like, I don't see why not. And, I'd like an elevator. I don't think it says, for disabled people only. I like elevators. Right? Just like women with strollers like ramps, right? And curb cuts. And, people that move stuff, right? That there is, that these things are made available to everyone. And I've had conversations with folks who are like, well, we don't have this population, and then the population will go somewhere else. then I need to talk about the fact that disability is a transient identity, right? So when I taught high school, we had this student who was in this car accident junior year, right? The student was well loved. People did all sorts of stuff to help the student out. Only if we didn't add those 2 steps in the new landscape that we just did. Right? If only we did a ramp. Because you thought, well, we don't have this issue. Do you want to tell a student, that in addition to this life-altering thing that has happened to you and the amount of therapy you have to go to, you also have to switch schools? Most of these conversations I think that we're having is to bring this type of awareness. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to name, I think a lot of people don't want to do children, youth, and family ministry or lead it because they think they're too old or their disability keeps them from doing it. And I just feel like I need to say it out loud, like that does not matter. And that if it matters, if that keeps you from doing your job, then maybe something within the system needs to change and not you and your age and your body. And I just proclaim that because as a kid, I hated camp. I have lived in a fat body my whole life, and while I don't think it's a disability, the rest of the world disables me from participating in certain things, including going to camp when there's weight limits for things, right? Or like wherever you go that you don't know if you're going to fit in a chair. So anyways, I said all this to say, I was like, I shouldn't be a camp leader, or I shouldn't be a youth leader because I don't want to take them to camp. But anyway, fast forward, I think that people with disabilities, people with physical disabilities have a lot to teach the church and a lot to teach young people about embracing and knowing and living in their bodies and recognizing their needs and their limitations. And I think are a huge asset to youth ministry.
Absolutely. There is this kind of constant thing that the youth minister must be a young person. Helpful if they can play the guitar. Right? And at some point you age out to do real ministry. You're going to be a big person, pastor. I remember I interviewed for a job to be a youth. There you go. I remember I was interviewing for a job to be a youth minister, and when they called me, I did not get the job. And the woman explained to me, she said, we went with someone else. Something about he played volleyball. I don't remember, but just weird. And then she said, I just really wanted to call you because we agreed that we think that you would make a really good pastor, and you should apply for that. And I responded, I thought that's what I was applying for, right? That the youth minister is a pastor and not just someone who wants to play games. And if you have someone who just likes to hang out and wants to play games, then they might decide that it's better to hang out and play games on the soccer field. Right? And you can't complain that they choose something else over youth ministry if you're not offering them anything different. So there is a whole world that we have to think about in terms of how we define our youth ministry and what we think it's for. Right? I would say youth ministry is for the spiritual formation of young people. Right? And church is for the spiritual formation of people, of the community of God. I recognize there are some developmental differences, right? So we have a youth ministry. That's not a mini church. It's not little church. And children are not the church of the future. Church of the future are people who don't go to church yet. Right? Children of the church, youth of the church, period. So I'm going to ask you help with something. I want to revisit BJ's story. Hold on, give me just a second. All right, there we go. I think all of these stories have something to unpack, but I wanted to revisit this one mostly because it's the longest and it has a lot to unpack. So I invite you to unpack it with me, the stuff that I was not able to unpack in the bigger session. So I'm going to read it again. There was a moment in my teenage years where I was sitting alone in the back pew of the church, feeling invisible. And there was a group organizing a retreat. But no one asked me if I wanted to go. I knew deep down that it was not out of malice. Just an assumption that I couldn't participate because of my disability. So I remember praying. Not for healing, though, but for understanding. I was like, God, do you see me? I whispered, and then I felt something shift. Not a loud answer, but a gentle presence. It was like the first time I truly thought of God not just as a powerful being, but someone who suffers with us. So I started to picture Jesus not only healing, but also like weeping with the hurting and walking slowly and listening to those overlooked, sort of all that. My disability has affected the way I see God, not so distant, but intimate. Be present in my struggle. When church has forgotten me, God hasn't. God hasn't. That realization changed me, taught me that my disability isn't low or too high. It's low or something to hide. It's the lens through which I see grace more clearly. So if we're really digging into this, I'm just going to ask, and you can shout it out, and I will repeat it into the mic, so you don't have to run around all over the place. Are there particular things, phrases, words that stick out to you when you hear this story? Feeling invisible. Cannot participate in something. Not invited. Jesus not just healing, but being with and suffering with. Right. Right. So God is always present. Right. Where can I go to flee from thee? And not like I'm trying, like you stalking me. It's, you are ever present, which can feel threatening but very comforting, right? I think about being a child and getting in trouble, which is something I rarely did. And hearing someone say, I'm going to call your mother and she's going to come get you. And that is often the way I always thought about, like, God sees you everywhere. God is always with you. Can't run from God. It's like, I'm going to come get you. right? And then I think about the time that I got sick at school. And like, unfortunately, threw up all over the place. And I walked into the office and they were like, ooh, girl, sit down, baby. I'm going to call your mother and she going to come get you. Right? And a different way of thinking about the ever presence of God.
I was about 9 and we were in Bangkok. I was in a Catholic school at that point for the first time in my life, and I was trying to figure out if God sees you everywhere, does God see you in the bathroom? And that was a question because you're not supposed to let people see you in the bathroom. And it felt weird and creepy enough that I finally decided my best bet was to ignore God, which is what I did for a long time.
Because, yeah, that's weird, right?
Children do weird things.
So when I think about the part of God is with me in the struggle, right? Suffering along with me, I'm gonna be honest. I hear that, and part of me wants to be really, really, really careful that we don't go into this idea of redemptive suffering, right? That I swear, if one more person told me about Paul and the thorn in his side when I talked about my chronic pain, right? This idea that this pain gets you closer to God, that the pain is a good thing if it brings about a good thing. And I don't hear BJ saying that. I don't hear him saying, it's a good thing they excluded me because now I know Jesus better, right? But the understanding that God can work through all things and still see you, even when other people don't see you, is a comforting presence. But I do think it is important to make sure that we aren't pushing this idea of redemptive suffering. In the same way that I'm hoping that we aren't pushing this idea of, I'm trying to think of another way to say it, but in the words of disability activists, this idea of the super crib, right? Like, you're so strong. You're so good, and you're so great because you live your life, right? I remember when I had the cast on in the 9th grade, the dean of students kept telling me how brave I was. And I really was like, okay, Mom, help me out here because all I do is go to school. Last time I checked, I was legally mandated to do that. I don't understand why this man keeps telling me that I'm so brave. Right? Like, I didn't know how to I was like, thank you. I mean, I didn't know what I was being brave about. So I was like, I was confused. And she's like, well, you know, what he told me was a lot of people would shy away, but you don't. You're out there. And I'm like, I'm really just going to school, right? Because what he's really saying is a lot of people should shy away, right? That what you're doing is great, because what people should do with having a body cast is to stay home or to stay in the corner and be shy. It didn't make sense to me, and I wasn't doing anything that I hadn't done before, right? So as we think about how we lay praise on people, that's kind of why I had the side note of don't tell the mother what a brave person she was, right? How great she was, how strong she was, because what she was doing was caring for her child. We think about these people who are who are living their lives, right? And saying, you know, you're so brave is saying you should not be in this space. Someone got a mic. Yes, sir.
That's exactly the sort of contrast I saw. I was my wife's caregiver as she went through Alzheimer's. From people outside, many people would say, "Oh, you were so strong. You did such a good job. It must have suffered," because that's their view from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
From the inside, that was doing it together was how we did everything. How else were we going to do it?
Yeah.
We talked about it and we said we're going to do it together, and that's what we did. I felt good about it. I didn't suffer.
Mm-hmm.
There was stuff that needed to be done, but that's all it was.
Right. And I also wonder what is behind that kind of praise that doesn't offer help. Right? So if you think that someone is just really going through some things to get to school and what they do is so great and so fabulous and it's so hard, why aren't you offering help?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I remember when I taught high school, we had these students who were from 45 minutes away. This was in New Jersey. Not great public transit on the bus. But they got up at like 4:30 in the morning to show up to school, right? And then if they wanted to do activities, like they wouldn't get home until 9 or 10. And, you know, this story would be like, oh, wow, those people are so dedicated, right, to this education. What a colleague and I would do is give them rides home.
Yeah.
Right? And to which some folks, I mean, they acted like, you know, we drove them all over the place. But this acknowledgement of like, aren't you so awesome? This is so hard for you when you do this hard thing. It's like, what in the redemptive suffering? If you really think it's difficult, then you offer help. Right? And try to do it in a way that isn't dehumanizing. Right? And it was, you want to ride home? If not, I mean, that's cool. Right? You know. So those are the things that I wonder and I think about when folks are working with looking at other people with disabilities with this sense of awe that really isn't awe. Right? You have you have the mic in your hand.
Yeah.
And
I
then we'll
just
go over
wanted to say real quick that people misunderstand what courage is,
Mm-hmm.
because we tend to think of it like, you know, and it is a way of putting people on a pedestal so we don't have to treat them like people.
Mm-hmm.
But courage is when the world feels like it's about to end and it would be so much easier to just stop and you take a step. It is painful, it is agonizing, and the people who are actually being brave don't know it because it sure doesn't feel like anything you want.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, when you tell people they're being brave, it's kind of like telling somebody, you're dying of cancer. It's like, yes, we know. Can we please stop talking about that? So it's a very difficult thing to hear, even when you know it's true, because it doesn't affirm anything you want affirmed.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't affirm their reality. Right? And then unhelpful. But I feel like I'm preaching to the choir right now. So after this, that's right. After this comment, I'm gonna make y'all work a little bit. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I think that might form into a question here.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm kind of wondering, so a little twist on pain and calling people, you know, a hero.
Mm-hmm.
In 2018, my niece and her husband lost their 22-month-old son. And it was very sudden. He literally looked up at his dad, smiled and coughed and passed out. And he ultimately, went without oxygen for too long, and that's what did it. But we spent a couple days in Denver at the Children's Hospital, and, you know, he was on life support, and they finally had to cut it off. And then they donated his organs. And my niece later told me, well, all these people keep telling me, you're my hero. I couldn't do this. You know, you're so strong and to donate and all of this stuff. And she said, I don't want to be anybody's hero. I'm not courageous. I don't. And I think people say those kinds of things because they don't know what else to say.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe my question is, you know, moving forward, how do we educate people in what do you say? You know, when people are talking about this hard stuff. I mean, it's easy. Well, it's not easy, but it's pretty clear to say, yeah, I can offer you a ride because you're having a hard time. But, you know, in grief and this kind of loss, boy, and I remember that weekend coming back to my pastor at church saying, you know, I didn't know what to say because even offering the love of God felt kind of empty. Because if it's me, I want my kid back.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, so
Yeah.
I guess take that as you will. But
Well, sometimes I think the answer is to say nothing. And I do wonder why people feel the need to talk, right? So when I've mentioned that I have 2 older brothers. They're both deceased, died 9 months apart. Nothing people said made me feel better. What I remember as helpful are people who, like, you know, sent groceries, or folks that came by to play cards. Right? So we don't always have to say something. And I recognize that we are in a culture that's not very comfortable with silence, right? There are a variety of ways to be with people. Hey, want to go for a walk? Right? Want to play some cards? Want to, you know? If there is a relationship beforehand, what did you do before? Go do that, right? And I, you know, I say that for grief, and I also say that for people who are living with disability, right? What you say is normal conversation, whatever normal means, right? So instead of having a news story about somebody going to the prom with someone with a disability and acting like going to the prom is a big deal, right? Other than, you know, it's prom night. How about you say to that person, oh, it's so great you took that person with disability to the prom. You say, how was the prom? Right? And we recognize the diversity of normalcy, right? And not make people feel like they are so other. I couldn't do what you do. Feel so other, right? Oh, is that a question? Mm-hmm.
Working with special ed students for over 20-some years.
Mm-hmm.
And their prom, they had 2 different proms.
Mm.
They had one for the regular
Mm-hmm.
class, and then they had one for the special ed students.
Mm-hmm.
And my question was why can't they just participate in the whole
Mm-hmm.
instead of being separate?
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe 5 years later they did that, so they didn't have to feel different or isolated,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So, but sometimes it's just being present in the moment helps. Don't say
Right.
nothing.
Right.
Just being present in the moment.
Right.
That
Just be
speaks
there.
volumes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the conversations when talking about disabilities, which is a large conversation is, what is healing? So y'all a smart bunch here. So I'm gonna put you to work, right? I'm gonna put you to work. And think about, what does healing mean? The people that I spoke to had a variety of disabilities, right? And understandably, there was a difference in the view of the disability if someone was born with a disability or had it for a very long time, as opposed to someone who was trying to figure out how to transition their life because something happened to, 2, 3, 5 years ago, right? And I find those differences really influenced how they viewed healing, what healing is. So I'm curious, from this beautiful hive mind, what would you say is healing in terms of physical disabilities or chronic illnesses or different bodily ailments? How would you define healing? Yes. Yes, there is a difference between healing and curing. The way, and there's a reason I didn't say curing. One, language is so spotty. Okay, I'm just gonna say it, then clean it later. So for many ailments, there is no cure, right? There currently is no cure for fibromyalgia, which is what I have, right? I would argue that I am healed, right? Healing looks different, but I'm not searching to. There is no scientific cure. I'm not searching for a cure. I'm done chasing cures, right? And don't suggest that I do yoga. Don't, stop giving me supplements. But I spent years chasing cures, trying to fix myself, right? I don't know if healing comes with a fix. So I connect cure. So that's one, right? And then I think of particular disabilities. Well, the deaf community, for example, while not considered a physical disability, but another type of disability, within that deaf community, there is conversation about cochlear implants, right? If there is a chance for someone to hear, yet they choose not to hear, right? The idea that hearing is a cure, as opposed to people saying there's nothing wrong with being deaf, right? And so we are not physically changing our body and implanting things into our body to hear. There's nothing wrong with being deaf, right? And major debate about that, which I'm not getting into, right? And people will argue, but why would you not choose that for your child? Why would you not choose hearing for your child, right? Like, their life would be so much easier, which goes back to the definition of the models of disability, right? That's a social model of disability. Their life would be easier because people don't know how to sign, right? Their life would be easier because people don't know how to deal with deaf people. So does that make being able to hear a cure? No. I think my life would be easier if I weren't black in Oklahoma. But I'm not trying to become a white, right? So yes, that's a long way of saying healing is different from curing. And what would you say? Yes.
Well, I happen to have just preached about this on Sunday. So
Excellent. I'm gonna take notes.
I don't want you to, I don't have all the answers, but here's what I sort of came to. And so it started with the scripture in Acts that we call Peter's conversion, when he figured out that Jesus came for everybody, and that the Gentiles. And so I started thinking, well, what is conversion? Because I grew up in Oklahoma, not so much in a fundamental church, but this fundamental Bible Belt culture where conversion is getting people on our team. And we won some souls for Jesus, for Team Jesus this weekend and at camp. And as I looked into conversion, it's about going to something. And so, Dr. LG, this reminds me, I took your education course, Christian education, a few years ago, and you always talked about freedom from something to something.
Yes.
And so conversion talked about that same thing, that we're turning from something to something, and that it's all about God's grace, that there's not, almost like we don't get to choose what the conversion is. So then that took me to salvation, because that's another big thing here. Come to the altar and ask Jesus into your heart, and you're saved, and now you're going to heaven. That's your ticket. But if we look at salvation, the Greek words used in the New Testament have to do with healing, with medical use, soterio and soterios, and it was about healing. So then that brought me to, okay, well, what is healing? And I thought about, well, it's not a cure, but sometimes I think it's acceptance. And it's that wholeness that we find even with our pain.
I would agree with that. Yeah. That is actually what I was thinking when I said, there is no cure for fibromyalgia. I will not be cured, but I am healed.
Right.
Part of my not chasing cures is acceptance. Is that I work with my body.
And
now,
I think it was Madeline L'Engle who said in one of her books, her husband was dying of cancer, and it should have been easily treatable, and everything kept going wrong. And she, wait, I've been praying for this, and she finally realized that acceptance was the answer to her prayer.
Right. And I will say, it looks like we need to start wrapping up. I will say that I hear the ableist response, and I'm calling it an ableist response. Acceptance is giving up. Don't give up. Fight it. We just love to fight everything, right? We just declare a war on stuff. I say, and I've written a piece called "I am not a fibro warrior." That is a statement people use. Like, I'm gonna fight this. I'm not giving into this fibromyalgia. Right? I'm gonna fight it with everything I have. I see that as problematic, and I'll tell you why. Because I don't want to make my body a battlefield. And oftentimes, when I chased cures, that is what was happening. Right? And if the notion of fighting helps one, seek better treatment, more power to you, right? But I think what is problematic with that language are several things. One, fibromyalgia is not out to get me, right? Like it's it's not it's not, right? It's something I have. Also, I don't want to win a war. I seek for healing. right? I am one of those that if there came out a cure, I'd probably take it. I'd give it a couple of years to see if it works, but I'd probably, right? I mean, I would rather not be in pain, but the healing that I seek, right? The peace that I seek doesn't come from war. So I accept what I have. I work with my body, right? And I have been surprised at how people have worked with me. I joke that I am definitely an old church lady because I literally have my own chair. Pews are uncomfortable. Y'all know this, right? I was like, these things are giving me pain. Pastor said, I don't see you in church as much. I said, pews are uncomfortable. So if I have a little pain, I don't show up. She said, no problem. What kind of chair you need? Stuck a chair at the end of the pew. I literally have my own chair. Right? And honestly, I've been surprised at how many people are willing to work if you kind of tell them what you need. And all of that is a part of healing. And people are walking in now. So I'm going to say thank you so much for all of the wisdom that you have shared with me. Thank you for your stories. Thank you for your knowledge. Thank you for your time. It's been great having this conversation with you.
And thank you. This was wonderful conversation. Reminder, worship is at 4:00 back in this room. Thank you.